An expression control is an easy way to link multiple values to one source that's intuitive and easy to use. You can find expression controls in the Effect Expression Control top-level menu. Probably the most commonly used control, the slider control, is versatile and simple to use. It's a slider that has a single value and can be linked to any property that can use a single dimension input. To add a slider control to a layer, just highlight the layer in the timeline and navigate to Effect, Expression Controls, Slider Control. You can link multiple properties to a slider for a nice transition animation. I can just add a new expression to each property and then grab the pick whip and link it to the slider control. When linking it to a property with multiple dimensions like this scale property, you'll see that it automatically fills in the temporary variable and fills it in for X, Y, and Z. Now, when the slider animates from 0 to, let's say, 100, and I'm going to add easy ease to both of these keyframes by pressing F9, and the result is a nice animation linking both properties to one slider. A checkbox control can be quite useful when setting up an if-else statement and toggling other dynamic options in your project. It outputs a Boolean, 0 or 1, which is false or true, based on its current state. To add a checkbox control to a layer, just highlight the layer in the timeline, navigate to Effect, Expression Controls, Checkbox Control. You can link a property to a checkbox control to produce an on and off state for the property. Open the property, in this case I'm going to use Planet Opacity, add a new expression, and pick whip the expression to the checkbox. Now when you do this, because it's unchecked, it's going to be 0 opacity, and when you check it, it only goes to 1, and that's because the checkbox outputs a 0 or a 1 based on the state. Now an easy workaround for this is to navigate to the end of the checkbox reference and add a multiplication operator followed by value. Now if I click away from the expression, it's going to jump up to 100 opacity, and then if I uncheck it, it's going to go back to 0. So 0 to 1 is now being multiplied by value, which in this case is 100. And this method works for a lot of values that you might want to link to a checkbox control. Now if you want more finite control over the checkbox control output, you can edit the existing expression. First, you can create a variable for the checkbox control reference, and then end that line with a semicolon. And then on the next line, we're going to use a linear function. So type linear, open parenthesis, and then the variable you created earlier, so in this case source, comma. And now this is a pretty standard linear function. So the checkbox outputs 0 and 1, so 0, 1, comma. And now we want our custom outputs. So maybe I want 25, comma, 75. End with a close parenthesis, click away from the expression field. So now you immediately see it goes to 75. And if I turn off the checkbox, it jumps to 25. So this is another way to remap the values that a checkbox outputs. The color control makes picking colors and applying them to many hard-to-reach color values a simple task. You can add a color control by highlighting the layer, going to Effect, Expression Control, Color Control, and then if I wanted to link a color on this layer, I can open up all the colors. So I'm just going to grab Glow 2, and here is the stroke color, add a new expression, and then just pick whip it to the color control. Now if I click outside of the expression field, you'll see that this middle ring has turned red because it's now linked to the color control, and then I can just click inside of here, change it to another color, hit OK, and it updates in real time. The point controls are nearly identical. They function the same as a position property using a 2 or 3 dimensional array to specify point values. They also include a source point selector. To add them to your layer, just highlight it in the timeline and go to Effect, Expression Controls, Point Control, or Effect, Expression Controls, 3D Point Control. So the only difference between them is the Z-axis, and they're pretty easy to pick whip to, so I'm going to open Position, add a new expression, and pick whip it to the 3D control because this is a 3D layer. And if I click away, it's come closer to the camera because normally it's 1200 pixels in Z, but now it's 0, and then I can move it using this controller. The angle control is identical to the rotation property. It outputs a rotational value in increments of 360 and displays the number of rotations. It includes a rotate dial for easy angle selection. You can add a rotation control by highlighting the layer in the timeline, going to Effect, Expression Controls, Angle Control. Say I wanted the planet to rotate on its Y-axis, I can Alt-click Y rotation to add a new expression, and then pick whip the angle control. Now if I click away from the expression, come up to the angle control and change the value, you'll see that the planet now rotates on its Y-axis. The layer control is my least used expression controller, but it's a handy way to change the layer that an expression is referencing without having to edit the source code of the expression. It only works with layers in the current composition. You can add it to a layer by highlighting it in the timeline, going to Effect, Expression Control, Layer Control. So here you have a drop-down showing you all available layers, and here's an interesting way to use it. So if you open the position property on the planet, Alt-click the stopwatch, grab the pick whip, and come up to the layer control and select it. It's going to give us the layer control effect reference. And then after this, I'm going to add a period operator, followed by a transform period operator position. If I click away, nothing's changed, and that's because this is selecting itself. But if I change this to rocket, you'll see that now the planet has moved to the rocket, or I can find star 4, there it is. So this is an intuitive way to target a layer in an expression. The process of linking an expression to a control is as simple as referencing the control within the source code, just like a normal effect. Here's an advanced example of linking expressions to a checkbox control. First, highlight the rocket layer and add a checkbox control. Now, highlight it in the timeline and hit T to open up opacity and add a new expression. Now, pick whip the expression to the checkbox control. Now if you come to the very beginning and grab your cursor and place it before the effect reference, we can create a variable. So I'm going to call it my val, V-A-L, capital V, followed by an equal sign, and then a semicolon at the end. On the next line, I'm going to begin an if statement. So I'm going to type if space open parentheses, and this is going to be the conditional statement. I'm going to just use a simple equality statement. So I'm going to use my val and then a double equal sign, and then I'm going to put true. And this is going to check to see if the checkbox control is checked. So I can close this with a close parenthesis, space, open curly bracket, and I'm going to create a new variable. So my result equals 100, close curly bracket. Now I can come to the next line and type else to give this a fallback. And I'm going to open curly bracket, my result, and this one's going to equal 0, close curly bracket. And the last line is just going to be my result. And that's going to output the result of the if-else statement. So now if I click away from the expression, the rocket's going to disappear and its opacity is going to be 0 because the checkbox control is not checked. But if I come in here and check the checkbox, the rocket comes back. So this was just to demonstrate how you can link a checkbox control to an if-else statement and how that syntax looks. We've arrived at the end of lesson 308, an overview of the many expression controls. If you enjoy this expressions course, consider purchasing the paid content. It includes in-depth documentation, extra tutorial content, high-definition videos, and all the project files used in the training. Your purchase will help to create more free courses like this in the future.